in terms of discussions, in terms of research, in terms of assessments, in terms of bringing together all the ideas that are on the table. I think it's very important, and this has to do, strangely enough, with these dates. With these dates, there's a conference coming, Rio+20. It includes the natural scientists. There was this big conference in March 2012 in London, Planet Under Pressure, and this conference was linked to Rio+20, and it brought together 3,000, 4,000 natural scientists, and they brought together their findings in a very concise State of the Planet declaration, which is kind of putting together what we know about the state of the planet after 10 years of research since Johannesburg, in a way. Then it's also for all the policy discourses. All the NGOs are getting together and developing kind of a new type of consensus language that might also have been possible differently, but it has been galvanized, it has been stimulated, it has been motivated by the date of June 2012, the Rio Summit. And I might include us as the Earth System Governance Project. I mean, we all came together. We were invited by the organizer of the Planet Under Pressure conference to bring together the state of knowledge in the social sciences, the state of knowledge in Earth System governance in a way. And we brought together many of our community and many of the panelists actually here. We came all together in a process where we had in the end a paper in Science with 32 authors, where we had lots of new ideas, I might say. I mean, we had also some workshops with Stein and others here in Hakone, I remember in Japan, where we really were sitting together. We were kind of smelting in hot springs for 2 days and eating Japanese food and sitting there in kimonos, and we had new ideas. I remember the day when Steiner suddenly he got up in a meeting and said, we have to change the UN Charter. I thought, Steiner, God, man, it's really kind of something that would not have happened without the summit, I guess I would say. So this is something that theoretically, of course, you can also do it without a global summit, but in practice, there is a certain impetus, and I think it's very important for this reason that we have this. The other question, of course, the functions are there, they are to some extent fulfilled. Is it worth the cost? So I think I've added and explained some of the advantages. The question is it really worth the tremendous cost of flying around thousands of people? This is kind of more the area of cost-benefit analysis. I think it's worth the effort, I think still. The other question is, and this I want to maybe we can discuss afterwards, whether the precise time of this Rio Summit is the right way. I believe that these dates, the deadlines, the precise conferences, I think they are important. One could question whether a total conference that addresses everything in sustainable development is the right way. Maybe we could focus more. Like when Rio had this areas like sustainable development framework, institutional framework was this big thing, but if you look at the declaration, everything has been covered. Tourism, whatever, so all kinds of issues have been covered, but only with not much detail. So one could think maybe one solution is to have these summits, but focused. Focus them on particular issues that minimize the cost and also kind of then galvanize only particular discourse in international environmental governance. And one could also maybe link them to other debates. One could link them to the General Assembly meetings, one can link them to this new idea of a high-level forum, sustainable development. So there are maybe some ways of reorganizing in a way that makes it cheaper and maybe more effective in the function that I have outlined. But in summary, I think I want to very much engage also everybody here in the discussions, and especially those who have worked in Lima and Rio. In summary, I think if the expectations are corrected, if people don't believe that a conference is a night on a white horse that will save the world in 2 days, if these expectations are more realistic, then I think the conference can be seen actually as a progress and something that is worthwhile to continue also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. You almost convinced me not quite, but Peter.
I'm not done.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think I need to confess that at the moment I'm feeling old and cranky, and that if the criterion we're applying to global conferences is that they advance the discourse, we've been trying to advance the discourse for 40 years, and if that's still what we're trying to do, then we're doing the wrong thing. It's time to get something done. I'm going to excuse me, make, I think, 3 sets of comments, all about the report that came out of Rio, which had the unfortunate title of The Future We Want. So I will briefly talk about the future we got, I'll mention the future we didn't get, and then I'll relate it to the future of international environmental politics. In fact, the agreed outcome by the governments at Rio was pathetic. We got 2 modest institutional reforms for which you didn't need any of this great setup. And the rest of the conference merely endorsed existing UN efforts. It didn't say anything beyond recognizing that there was a whole bunch of stuff in the pipeline. They didn't even say, we should do something about it. It was just, we recognize that a whole lot of stuff is going on. There was a number of proposals that were in the preliminary documents that disappeared. That is, the future that we didn't get disposed of any focused concern on planetary boundaries, on discussions of the human right to a clean environment, the creation of an environmental ombudsperson or a high commissioner for the environment, or any discussions about sustainable production and consumption. The reasons for this weak set of negotiated outcomes are familiar to everybody who studies international environmental politics, right? This is an easy case for understanding global governance. And if you sort of think about it, all of the factors that people in this room who rely on to explain, I don't want to say effective, but successful outcomes were absent. Right? It's a case of it's a non-event. And we all predicted that it was going to be a non-event because we looked at these variables and said, they're not there, nothing's going to happen. There was no state leadership, in part because there wasn't domestic pressure in any of the major governments, in part because they were countervailing geopolitical forces that distracted foreign ministers' attention, the Arab Spring and the recession, so nobody cared about the environment. The only expression of state leadership that was present in Rio was the Brazilians, and all the Brazilians did was to harass delegations to get them to accept the existing document. Nobody even wanted to do that. Right? So the Brazilians come up with a least common denominator outcome because the Brazilians don't want to be humiliated by having a bad outcome on their turf, and nobody else has to make any concessions whatsoever. So you get an easy outcome. Yeah, I mean, if anything, we get to see that the Brazilians are an emerging power because they've got good diplomats. The bureaucracy. There was no effective international bureaucracy capable of playing an autonomous role. The whole secretariat function was run out of New York, and to a large extent that was by choice. That the governments wanted or they didn't care if they got a good conference or not, so they were willing to consign the preparations to bureaucrats that they know weren't going to be able to deliver anything. If we look at the history of these sorts of mega conferences, the successful conferences, Stockholm and Rio, had the secretariats based in Geneva, not in New York. Right? The first step that the Secretary Generals did in preparing these conferences was to move the preparatory bureaucracy out of New York. There wasn't any scientific consensus or epistemic community. There was discussion of planetary boundaries, but planetary boundaries remain, sort of fringe science in the scientific community, and it wasn't widely, the concept wasn't widely accepted by governments. Right, so it's the absence of a perfect storm